Hello everybody and welcome to the Quilter's Apothecary. Today the video you're about to watch is part of our Patreon Quilt Along series. With that Quilt Along series what we do is we actually film and you are quilting along with me every step of me quilting a custom quilt. So I hope you enjoy this, and if you want to see more, what we do is we release about 1 out of every 12 here on YouTube. But if you want to see a ton more content, head over to Patreon and subscribe. I hope to see you there and enjoy the video. The wool is going to be towards the top, and then the 80-20 is going to be towards the back, so that way it will hang completely straight. Now, whenever I'm doing a filler or any type of an edge to edge, I always like to use my screws. I do have a tutorial on that. Ruler itself, and I want to make sure to walk my hand with the ruler so that way I'm not holding my hand back here and the ruler is bobbing up and down and has the opportunity to go up over the ruler. So now we're on our hexagon block, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide this. I'm going to go from the tip here down to the tip here. I am then going to go over here and then go from the tip here up to the tip here. Then I'm going to go over here and go from the tip here to the tip here, go down here, tip there, and we're going to divide this space. So we're going to treat it like a 9 patch with corners taken out. Line that up. Now I'm not worried about the shape of the block or how the block was cut out or sewn. I'm actually going from tip to tip, because once I do the filler, that will help add the shape or the integrity of the shape back in. Again, we always want to make sure to keep your ruler nice and flat. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here. And we'll go straight across.
And what ruler are you using to do that you generally never use for ditch work?
That's right. So what Rich just was mentioning was I am using the small 45, which is actually a gigantic straight ruler that we made for people to do 45-degree crosshatch. I rarely use this. I only pull this out probably 20 times a year because it's so long. Typically, if I'm doing ditch work or anything, I like this one. But I want something that's a nice straight of way across these large...
Unless you're doing straight crosshatch.
Unless I'm doing straight crosshatch or 45-degree crosshatch. And again, typically I want to make sure to walk my fingers because we don't want the ruler because it's so long. That's the problem with a ruler this long is the wobble. You could actually go right on top of the foot and then the needle will come down. So you got to take care to walk the ruler as you're traveling. Exercise caution, indeed. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is we're going to go over to the cruise, and now I'm going to fill in, I'm going to checkerboard this. So I'm going to fill in these two corners, and the middle. And I'm going to leave these 4 patches empty. So I'm going to fill in this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Okay, so now make sure we can get a good visual. And I'm just simply doing a nice swirl fill. Maybe throw in a few feathers just 'cause. Slide into the center. Head my way over to the corner. Slide into the corner. And I'm going to work my way all the way around this block and fill in those sections. I'll do that on all of the hexy blocks. They're all just a little bit different shape, but I'm not going to worry about that. Slide up into there. Because the quilting will tie it together. And the quilt is big enough so even though things are going to be a little different in each block based on the size, it's actually going to look really cool. Slide down into here. Now my fabric's a little wobbly because I have a little bit of full back going on, and so I shoved some batting underneath the roller, and so that raised this quilt up a little bit, which is going to make it slide that ditch, head over here, make it shake a little bit. And sometimes that just happens on big quilts. This is a huge quilt. Huge. I believe it's meant for a king-size bed. Okay, lock those stitches. All of that is full. Let me pick up, get that. Needle down, up, pull away. And so now we have our block. Let me get a little bit of light over there so you can see that texture a little bit better. Okay, so now in the center of this double wedding ring type block that is kind of in the center of the quilt, I think we have probably about 8 or 9 of these blocks. Mary wants a Celtic knot shape. So I have picked out a Celtic knot and I have centered it. Now I am fairly new to custom quilting with my computerized system. So I am going to throw in a computer design in here. I'm not really going to go through the process of how I did that because everybody has a different computer machine. And then once I get more experience, I might throw up a tutorial or two of how I choose to do that. So aside from that, we're just going to watch the medallion be dropped into here because that's the only computer portion of this quilt. Now I have my design laid out. I have it centered. I'm going to go ahead. We're going to run that design. Let me first make sure, I always want to make sure no matter what computer system I'm running that I have my needle up in the up position. And I was running this in the down position earlier. So we've got that up. Okay, it's going to let me pick up my thread. I'm going to grab my bobbin thread And now I hit resume. It's going to go back. It's going to take some lock stitches, and now it's going to begin. I'm going to trim my thread. It actually stops and gives me that time. So I'm going to hit resume. And now it's going to quilt out this really cool Celtic knot pattern. By the way, I actually have this quilting out on the gray with the yellow thread that we were using earlier, this pale yellow. Now, this is a design that I could have used circles and I could have done freehand, but it would have taken a lot of time and some planning. And so again, we have the machine to do this, and so for me it's good to combine new technology with freehand. It's a wonderful marriage.
You told me earlier you were going to pretend like you were quilting.
I know, I was going to pretend that I was quilting it, but you know, darn it all. It's like a player piano. That's cool. That is beautiful. So we are done, and so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plan what we're going to do around this section, because I don't want to just leave the block like that. I still want to do some work up here. So, and I do have two different plans we're going to try. Now, one of the reasons I didn't skew this is because I wanted the proportions to stay exactly the same for each of the blocks. And therefore, even though the blocks are shaped just a little bit differently because they're on point and it's just kind of part of piecing a double wedding ring type quilt, the medallion itself will all be the proper proportion and the same size in all my blocks. Okay, so now we've laid in our design in the center of this space, and so what I wanted to do was to kind of show you how I'm going to frame this out, because I want to put a little bit more quilting in all of our four spots just to fill up the block a little more. Because if I hear anything about dropping in a computer design into a block, one of the things that I hear is you didn't space it or skew it or whatever enough to fill the block. So what I always like to do is add a little bit to it just to accentuate and frame it. So what I've done is I've used a straight ruler and I've gone down. Now I already had a cross through the center, so that was all set. And then what I did is I located the centers this way. And what I did on the cross is I used my 45-degree mark on my ruler, and I did my cross this way and this way. So now we have an 8-piece pie. So now I know that this is the center of my curves. So what I'm going to do is choose the size curves that I want for this particular design. Let me move that machine out of the way for a second to kind of show you. So I'm going to use this particular curve to get an arc. I'm going to go from here, and I also measured down and made a decision. I went to 4 inches and put a mark down, and then I also went to 5 inches. So we've got a mark at 4 and we've got a mark at 5. Now when I look at this extra large curve and the curvature there, I audition that and I make the decision, how do I like the size of that curve sewn into there? And that is definitely one option. The other option would be the double X large, which would be one size up, and we actually have already used that to actually kind of mimic the curvature here when we were doing the ditch work around there. And you know, I gotta say, I think I'm gonna go with the double X large. Initially I was gonna go with the extra large, but I think that the double X large is gonna be a little less intrusive of the design itself, and it'll frame it a little better. Locked my stitches where I need them, and I'm gonna make sure to line this ruler up so that that spot is gonna hit exactly a 1/4 inch away from where it needs to be. Okay, so I'm going to curve up. I'm up at the line, stop, pivot. Now I'm going to come back. So now my 1/4 inch away is going to hit right in the center there. Come down, stop. Now I'm going to pivot my ruler again because now I want to go back to my 5-inch spot that I'm going to hit. Come up, stop, pivot, line it up, 1/4 inch away from where I want it to end. Come down, pivot. Good. So now that section's done. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to leave my needle down there. And even though I haven't ditched this section yet, that's okay. I am still going to go ahead, put in my chalk line. And I'm going to go ahead. You probably hear the peanut gallery in the back. I've got the ladies here in the studio, Gypsy and Iris, my Dane and Shepherd Dane mix. And they're over there talking to each other. You know, it's the whole thing. Gypsy's in bed, in her bed laying down, and Iris always wants her bed. And then they'll switch, and then Iris will go back and say, okay, I changed my mind, I want the other bed. So you might be able to hear them in the background. Okay, so now I've got this one marked out, and I'm going to go ahead, line up my ruler. I'm going to do my pivot, same way, up, stop, turn my ruler, and actually I could turn it this way, depends because I'm using a curve 2. That means the curve is the same on both sides. There's my middle. I'm going to come to right there, line that up there, and actually what I'm going to do is I am going to go this way to get the B-roll camera. That's going to be a little easier for me to maneuver. I tend to make it a little hard on Rich for editing. Okay, and then I'm going to drop it down to the 15-inch spot. Up, pivot, stop. Do the same thing. Come in here, line it up. Make sure it's 1/4 inch away. Up, pivot, stop. And now I've got that wonderful accent, as you can see right here, for around this frame, and it looks really beautiful. I'm glad I chose that. I had actually as well thought about, I'll show over here, what I also had considered was doing like some nice curve, but I think this is a much better frame for this particular design. I want to go over is I went ahead and in this football shape, or this oval shape here, I went ahead and I ditched the center, the dead center, and then I went 1/2 inch out to the left and 1/2 inch out to the right, just to give myself some negative space. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill in this side as well as this side. And I'm going to leave these 2 channels unquilted, just to kind of add a little bit of texture to that. And I think that's going to look really lovely. It's definitely going to go with the motif of the Celtic knot as well as the other blocks. And again, I'm simply using a swirl filler. So I shall go ahead, since you've already seen the swirl filler, and we'll speed this up. Okay, I'm going to lock my stitches. Now, trim my thread, pull away so you can get a shot. Let's see. There we go, that's a little bit better. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this. It is finally off the frame, and literally it was just pulled off the frame this morning. So we have obviously some distortion that with hanging or just laying flat for a little bit, or if Mary Flinn, who is the wonderful piecer of this quilt, wants to block it, which of course is getting it wet and laying it out flat and pinning it and straightening it, she can do that. But typically with this quilt, because it's so big, I think it's like 114 by 114, it's huge. Then laying it flat on a bed for probably a day or two is going to make the distortion completely go away. Now, this of course is a double bat. It's got an 80-20 in it. It has the poly down in it as well, because we want it to be to show off the quilting. Otherwise, why pay so much for custom quilting? But also we want it to be cool in the summer, warm in the winter, because they live in a warm climate area. So this should actually fit the bill. It's not too heavy. It's as heavy as a 114 quilt by 114 is going to be, but you know, that's the best that can be done there. So I'm first going to have Rich focus up here. I want to go up, and actually let me take him over here if he can. Let's go up into this upper corner, because if we notice, Rich, can you kind of get a whole shot of this quilt again? We almost have two quilts in one as you're doing this. And excuse my sweats, but it's Sunday afternoon. I'm quilting in the studio, and I'm not dressed to kill, or am I ever? The quilt itself is almost two quilts in one. We've got the four corners, which is one type of a piecing pattern, and then we have this wonderful double wedding ring on point kind of in the center to kind of offset, which is pretty amazing. I'm not sure if Mary planned this particular pattern on her own or what, but it really is a beautiful piece and very original. She did an amazing job with it, and this would have been a very difficult quilt to piece, combining two different piecing patterns, in my opinion. Now, and especially with all the on point and bias stuff in it. So now let's go back up to this corner, of course. So what we did up here is I divided the hexagon shapes, and some of them I switched a little bit just to add interest. So on these, they go vertical, horizontal, and then on the ones coming down the side where it connects, I actually went on point with it on the diagonal with that. And a few of these, if you look up there at the one on top, I actually put that third one different. And again, that just keeps the eye moving across the quilt to add some interest. So that's kind of how I handled all 4 of the corners. And I like that. I think that turned out great. I went inside. I think we talked about this at the beginning. It's been so long, this thing has been on the frame and being completed for about 5 weeks now. So it's a quilt that took a while, even though I have 6 other quilts loaded on this other machines. So I've been bouncing around. But I went in and I echoed this just to add that texture in there. Filled in here. Of course, I left a little bit of channels in a lot of the areas. Now, when we start getting into the double wedding ring portion here, of course, what I did is I ditched on the outside of each of these. I didn't want to go in here and do a lot of work, but I did do a double echo, I think a half of an inch in, half-ish, with my curved ruler, and it wasn't the exact same curve, so I kind of had to turn the ruler to keep it as consistent as can be. And I did that all the way across and all the way down. Mary wanted Celtic knot in the block, so if we can go in and get a kind of a close-up there. We put the Celtic knot in the middle of each of the blocks. This is the only thing in the quilt that was done with the computer. Everything else, the filler and all that, is freehand with the ruler and just freehand. So this is each of the Celtic knots I kind of centered in each of the double wedding ring curved squares and left some space on the outside. And what I did here is I, as you saw when we did it at the beginning, I put this wonderful arc in here and filled in those. So all in all, and then of course filled in all of my squares here, which I like. I went in 3/4 of an inch just to again add some negative quilting, give it some texture. So there we go. So that's pretty much the whole quilt in a nutshell. So let's take a minute and let's talk about, now that this quilt is done and hanging, I absolutely love it. I think it turned out amazing. Hopefully she'll love it. One never knows. I've learned that through the years. If I were to do anything different, is there anything I would do different? Yes, there is something that I would do different. If it were my quilt and I were repeating this quilt, what I would do is here in this block, let's narrow in on this section right here, Rich. Okay. If I were to redo that, I would actually flip opposite what I did. So what I would do is I would do everything the same, except this channel I would have left unquilted, this little arc or boomerang channel, and then this right next to the Celtic knot, I would do micro work on the inside in here and here on the outside of that boomerang. And so I would have flipped what I filled and what I didn't fill. I like this. I think this is going to be beautiful, but I would like to see the opposite as well, just to see how that looks, because I think that would be a really cool look as well, to actually pop that Celtic knot out. The reason I didn't do that initially is I was a little concerned that if I did do that, it would hide the Celtic knot. Now that I've put the Celtic knot in, I see that, okay, I think with some micro work here and on the outside, and then this left open, that would have been another option for me to do. And actually, that is really the only thing that I think I would do different at all. I love how the quilt turned out. I think that I think it works beautifully. I think it's going to be a wonderful family heirloom. I know that Mary made this for a relative who is getting married. It's actually a month late. It was supposed to be done in December, but it wasn't, for Christmas. But there we go. So that is the end of this one. So we will move into our next quilts. So again, I hope you're enjoying all of these videos and the quilts along with me. And we've got a lot more wonderful things coming up. So have an amazing time. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. We'll see you down the road. All right, so now that is done. I forgot that you were filming.
What do you think it is? A holiday?
I know, I'm so sorry. It's like, get off your iPhone. Okay.